Can the Dallas Cowboys defense rise up and steal a win in Week 11 over the Texans? We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's absolutely no cost and it's easy to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are previewing the Week 11 matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. And I got to say, Landon, this is one of the first times in my life where this is a Monday night football game, should be a big game. And this is the first time all morning that I've thought about that game, which is really wild. This is where we're at with the Cowboys season. It's it doesn't feel like an event anymore. It feels like something we have to suffer through together.
If that's not truly an indictment, right? There on where the season is, look, in the history of the Cowboys, we could say a lot of things about them being good, them being bad, historically good, historically bad. But it feels like one of the few things that we've been able to or one of the few things we haven't been able to say over these years is that they're not interesting. They're not fun to watch. They're not appointment television. I think, for the most part, that's been the draw with the Cowboys nationally for a long time, is that they're always kind of in the middle of something, right? And that's really the big difference, is that, I think they've been bad in the past. Dak's been hurt in the past. We've seen worse teams maybe, or at least certainly as bad teams as this Cowboys team. But I think the indictment on them more than anything is that they're not interesting to watch, and it certainly isn't appointment viewing the way it had been previously. So, I think that is obviously a large part in due to the injuries, but I also think that a good portion of it is also just that this is not a very well-oiled machine, and it never really kind of got out of the starting blocks. But I having said all that, it's an oblong ball. The ball bounces weird. Who knows what can happen? And again, when you're talking about kind of a random interstate rivalry, sometimes there's feelings involved, and sometimes that can change the angles on things. So I'm certainly not anticipating a Cowboys blowout, but anything can happen in these games.
Yeah, we're going to preview this game, but I just want to say there was a lot of apathy going into the season for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think that apathy combined with how the first 7 games of the season went, now with Dak being injured and now with all the other injuries, it just has been a not very fun season for a lot of different reasons. And listen, if you're a Cowboy fan of my age, you're in your late 20s or early 30s, you don't really remember the 90s Super Bowls, right? So you don't have the glory of those years, right? Instead, you have this weird 2000s, 2010, 2020 Cowboy team, which is always a contender, but not good enough to make the Super Bowl or make the NFC Championship game. And the Cowboys have kind of ended up becoming almost like a punching bag to the rest of the league. And that's the worst thing when watching these games. If this is another one of these blowout losses and everybody's just getting their jokes in on the Cowboys, which would be well-deserved, it takes a lot of juice out of these games.
Look, I'm not trying to get any more extra sympathy than anybody else. Nobody has any sympathy for NFL teams that are losing, because it happens to everybody. But there is something frustrating about the fact that, you kind of you get everybody's best shot every single time, and every week everyone's, doing their best. They feel like they have some sort of grudge against your team that, your team doesn't remember playing, or the last time they played them. It is frustrating to kind of deal with that. And there's lots of other bad teams out there, but it does feel like the Cowboys are kind of the butt of the joke bad team right now because of everything.
They're not playing well. They're getting embarrassed. They should be. It's just one of those things. But let's talk about this game. I want to start with the Cowboys defense, because if the Cowboys are going to win this game or be competitive, let's go with that. If the Cowboys are going to be competitive, it's going to have to be the defense. And one of the things that we've seen from this Texans offense the last couple of weeks is They haven't been great. They've been getting crushed on the offensive line. CJ Stroud has been off a little bit. Now they are getting Nico Collins back. Surprise,
Yeah,
surprise, that
of
a big
course.
time receiver is going to be healthy to play the Cowboys. But how do the Cowboys on defense without Jordan Lewis, without Deron Bland, how do they get stops in this game?
I mean, they're just gonna have to like be aggressive and attack CJ Stroud and attack this one game, and they don't really have the horses currently to play coverage on the back end for long periods of time without the corners that you mentioned with all the injuries that they've got. They've got to find a way to attack, to sell out and attack and just hope, for the best, hope for more mistakes and hope for just an inefficiency on offense. It frankly isn't too different than the kind of game plan that they've had to play against these offenses these last few weeks, right? I mean, the Cowboys have sort of faced a murderer's row of offenses in a lot of ways. It's much in the way that the early season was kind of a murderer's rows of pass rushers for Tyler Guyton. So I think again with the Cowboys, basically having middle of the pack defense on a good day, facing a top end offense, you just have to find ways to force their hands into making mistakes and hope that they do make mistakes. You're just not going to be able to line up and play these guys, toe to toe for 4 quarters. So I
No.
think the Cowboys have got to find ways to fool CJ Stroud. He's still a young quarterback, even though he's incredibly smart and heady. They have to find, blitzing and sending guys from weird spots, just to kind of muddy the picture, confuse things. And then obviously, the same situation with as it always is in the run game. They've got to find a way, despite their kind of lack of talent on that side of specifically the run defense side of things, to try to slow down the running attack of the Texans because again, like every other team in the league, if they continue to remain balanced in their attack, it becomes more difficult to send the house at them and really kind of get them off their game in the passing game. So I just think the Cowboys kind of have to do a little bit what they've been doing, right? Is just not be afraid to be aggressive, not be afraid to send folks. Understand that you're shorthanded and you're underwhelming defensively talent wise, and find ways to just kind of create chaos and hope that the Texans make a mistake.
This is a game where it would be really nice to see Micah Parsons lined up over any of the 3 interior offensive linemen. They've had a ton of problems with
Yeah, that's the
inside side. Juice Scruggs, their center, he's playing left guard now. Jarrett Patterson, I believe, is a day 3 pick or an undrafted free agent from Notre Dame. Yeah, 6th-round pick from Notre Dame.
yeah.
He's been not good this year. Shaq Mason, the right guard, has
Yeah.
struggled. So Stroud is one of these quarterbacks where he can move, he's athletic, but he doesn't really want to get out and scramble. If you can get pressure into his face, he'll sometimes try to throw through the pressure, and that's when you can get the interceptions. If the Cowboys want any chance at all, this is going to have to be a massive Micah Parsons game. And honestly, Landon, I think it's going to happen. Like, I think this is going to be a great, great Parsons game. And I think they're going to be able to find a way to get some stops, some takeaways, some turnovers on defense. I think we'll see it.
It's funny. You think about these games, and then sometimes you think about the matchups that make you smile. Sometimes they're about relationships that people have, like former players, and everything. I started thinking about the fact that CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons did all those podcasts the whole last season, so they're buddies, right?
Yep.
And I started thinking about the fact that Micah's going to want a little bit of extra juice to go after his buddy CJ. So, listen, I think you nailed it on the head, right? And frankly, this was the book on CJ Stroud coming out of Ohio State, right? Is that everyone thought inside the pocket, 7-on-7 situation, he's elite. He knows where to throw the ball. He knows how to throw the ball. He can read defenses. The issue that people had was the creativity in creating when the pocket broke down, right? And I think he showed a lot more of that his rookie year than a lot of us even expected, right? And I think to the point where we were all like, oh man, a lot of us were really wrong about CJ Stroud, and he was showing himself to be in the top echelon of quarterbacks at certain points last year. This year, he hasn't had as much security, like you've mentioned, the front of his pocket. It's affected his game because, like you mentioned, he is a guy that wants to step up into a pocket, deliver a ball cleanly down the field, and he's trying too hard to try to do it, despite all the pressure, just trying to get the ball off, through arms and hands. And he's had kind of mixed results. And because he isn't necessarily even though he's better than we expected at getting out of the pocket and creating, it certainly isn't his game. It certainly isn't like something that he excels at. So I agree. I think if the Cowboys are able to find ways to disrupt the center of that pocket, obviously you've got the right defensive coordinator for it, right? The guy that invented the double A gap that can really kind of disrupt the center's timing. You mentioned it. They've got a backup center. Maybe you can just screw up a shotgun snap because he's worried about the two linebackers in the A gaps on either side of him. But either way, they've got to find a way to create pressure up in front of Stroud's face. That will make him forced to roll out. That doesn't mean that that's the end of the play, that you've won, but it certainly is a better way of having the Texans attack you on the perimeter while CJ Stroud's running than allowing him to step up into an open, clean pocket and deliver the ball to one of his many playmakers that he has on the outside.
Let's talk about the Cowboys offense, which I am way less confident in going into this Week 11 matchup. How do the Cowboys find ways to score points? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. I've taken a couple of these courses. They're absolutely fantastic. My favorite thing is that they're self-paced, so you can start whenever, wherever. I like to put them on for 15 minutes as I'm in my truck or whether I'm on a little walk, whatever you want. They're so convenient and easy to access. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just kick back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's absolutely no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Plus, it's the best way to get action in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are previewing the Week 11 matchup between the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. Let's switch over to the Cowboys offense. Another Cooper Rush game. How do they score points against this really good Houston defense?
It's going to be a struggle. I mean, I think, look, I mean, as it stands right now with Cooper Rush at quarterback, you're looking at probably one of the most inefficient offenses in football, right? Just, the Cowboys offense was designed to work with Dak Prescott. And I think that the struggles that the Cowboys offense has had, specific to this year, has made the situation for specifically Cooper Rush even worse, right? You just don't have the ability to consistently push the ball down the field. You're not getting guys that are winning on the edge consistently to make life easier for Cooper Rush. You've got a run game that is, still kind of trying to find its way a little bit. And I think that's where we have to start, right? Is that I just think if you're making an effort to win this game, then you look at the roster as you've got it constructed, and you looked at the Texans roster, and I think you have to kind of go the kind of classic run game defense wins this game, because you don't really have other options, right? Like you don't really have the choice of winning a shootout or getting into a situation where you can play a balanced game of offense and consistently kind of, drive the ball down the field that way and score points at a pace that the Texans can. I just think that you have to find a way to play keep away at this. If you're trying to actually, win this game, it's a matter of slowing the game down, keeping the ball away from CJ Stroud, not exposing your defense, and frankly, not exposing your passing game by by trying to get into reasonable down and distances. Now, I think that the way that the Cowboys do this while still being able to throw the ball, because obviously they have to throw the ball, right? Is they need to be better about, at least better than they have been with Dak, about throwing the ball on kind of non-passing downs, right? Like, first down or if they get a good run on first down, second down.
You're not going to win throwing on 3rd and 9 against this pass
That's
rush.
Right. Look, against this pass rush with the guys they've got, Hunter and Anderson on the outside.
And Anderson's actually out this week, but yeah, they have.
Oh, Hunter. He is out this well. Yes. Even then with just Danielle Hunter, that's enough, frankly, and the rest of that group. You just can't expose them to long developing pass plays down the field, especially since you're going against a team that has a very good secondary as well, right? Like, so I don't think you can expect that anyone outside of CeeDee Lamb is going to win consistently in one-on-one situations. So you need to find ways to create a pass game off of constraints from your run game, throwing the ball on kind of non-traditional passing downs and non-traditional passing situations to try to catch this defense off guard, and then just hope that your offensive line and your running back can generate enough that you can possess the ball long enough, hold on to it, maybe slow this game down to a snail's pace. Maybe you get to a situation where it's a field goal will win it, and guess what, guys? You probably have the best field goal kicker in football at this point. So you got to find a way to do. If you want to win this game, you probably have to find a way to kind of old ball coach this game into a slowed game where you run the ball and possess as much as you can.
Yeah, I should mention on the defensive line, Will Anderson's out. They don't have a lot of edge depth. Danico Autry is probably going to be one of their edge defenders starting in this game. He's struggled this year. They're going to be without Fatukasi, their top defensive tackle in this game. Tim Settle and Mario Edwards Jr. are their defensive tackles, and I believe Tommy Togiai, who they just picked up, who's been awful in the NFL. So theoretically, you look at the defensive tackles, and this should be a game in which Tyler Smith, Zach Martin, and Cooper Beebe dominate. However, what I would like to see from Mike McCarthy in this game is try not to run the ball out of shotgun, right? Like get under center and let Rico Dowdle run downhill with a head of steam. And you might not have a lot of success, but that's probably the best way to keep this clock going. And honestly, this is what we want to see moving forward from this team is, can they run the ball when teams know that they want to run the ball? If they can, that'll be really encouraging, not just for this year, but for long term. And then in the passing game, it's going to have to be big plays. Like one of the things we saw last week against Philly is that I think Mike McCarthy tried to do a game plan of like, hey, let's just throw a bunch of short passes and we'll try to be efficient that way. You will not be able to beat the Texans by trying to complete 11 passes on a drive. Like they're too good on defense. This is where I would rather see this be one of the games, Landon, where let's take a shot down the field to CeeDee Lamb and let's just put a bunch of air under it and see if he can draw a pass interference or make a crazy catch. Like do things like that maybe are a little bit less efficient, but have more boomer bust potential.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna have more opportunities to do that this week than say you did against Philly, simply because of the fact that you don't have a Vic Fangio defense, right? Like Fangio is definitely gonna want to keep he's gonna keep shells. He's gonna play 2. He's gonna play 4. He's gonna play 6. He's gonna have 2 safeties back there, so he's gonna force you to kind of throw it short. And I think you're right in the sense that McCarthy was trying to lean into that, right, and just try to throw out a short passing game that would be efficient against a Fangio defense and hope that that you break some tackles and go that route. That didn't work.
Do that.
No. And you don't really even need to. That's the beauty of it, is that I think against, look, this we've as much as we've seen a Fangio defense, I think in the same way we've seen more than we want to see of this defense. Obviously, it having its roots in San Francisco, and all the different times that we've struggled against, those sort of this sort of defense. I think they're going to play more cover 3, more cover 1. You're going to see more guys, a safety in the box to try to slow down the run, especially if the Cowboys do kind of lean into the run game a little bit. You're going to see D'Amico Ryans like drop a safety down. They're going to want to play all the time. They're going to want us to play cover 3, cover 1. Like, this is not a situation where you're going to have as much cover shell situations. Nope. So there will be opportunities to throw the ball down the field, with CeeDee Lamb, with some of your faster guys. So maybe, you get them all kind of playing forward, you start running the ball, and then obviously a play action over the top. That's the traditional way to kind of, get the big play situation out of this sort of game plan. Again, I do agree. I think keeping the quarterback under center, it allows more opportunity for the bootlegs and that sort of thing that can kind of, those are the kind of big plays that I think Cooper Rush will have success in, where it's a throw across the field horizontally to a player who's on the run off a play action naked bootleg or something like that. You can get the ball to a guy who's coming across the field, can turn upfield, get some yak. I don't want to see a ton of Cooper Rush dropping back 5-step and trying to throw a 9 route to CeeDee Lamb, because he's not great at it, and it's just not a high percentage shot. But you do need to take shots. You do need to generate big plays. I think you can do it by folding in, plays, constraints that work against the run game that you're going to be including in your offense.
Last thing before we move on, who's starting at left tackle for Dallas tonight?
It's a great question. I think it's Guyton, but I don't know why I would feel confident about it at this point. We'll see.
Who do you want it to be?
I think it should be Guyton. I think we should continue to try to work Guyton in there and see him out there. I think that, if you wanted to have a conversation about moving somebody at some point just to kind of test some guys, I'm on board with that. But I don't think you should be moving Guyton, right? I think the Guyton has been schooled as a left tackle this whole time. Let's not change it up, for him. I don't want two guys that are kind of constantly without a home. Put one of them in a home and then figure out what you're doing at the other spot with the rest of your guys.
All right, let's make our predictions for Week 11, Texans, Cowboys, Monday Night Football. Landon, get fired up. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like I did yesterday watching Pittsburgh-Baltimore, you just knew that Pittsburgh was going to find a weird way to win that game. Pittsburgh was actually an underdog at halftime despite leading that game. Went and bet on them, made a nice little chunk of change. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. FanDuel just makes it so easy. It's so convenient. It's so easy just to go look at the lines, go look at the money line. Go visit FanDuel.com today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show with Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins. 2 shows every single day. Probably the only 2 NFL hosts out there that can sympathize with us, Landon. It's available wherever you get your podcast. Let's make our predictions for this Week 11 game. Who do you have winning?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick the Cowboys. I don't know why. I mean, and you and I talked about this before the show. I got a weird feeling earlier in the week that the Cowboys would win this game, simply because there's no way they should win this game, right? Like this feels like the kind of game that the Cowboys find a way to win when they shouldn't, right? They're I think they're more than a touchdown underdogs at home.
Yeah. So I think it's
Right?
7.5 last time I checked FanDuel.
7.5 points dogs at home. The injury list looked like just the game day roster is what it looked like. It was so long. I had to scroll on my phone to see the whole list just to the Cowboys side. The Cowboys have not played very well this season. The offense has not been very good at any point, even with Dak Prescott at quarterback. And now that we have Cooper Rush and maybe even some Trey Lance playing, I can't imagine it would be better. Having said all of those things, and maybe because of all those things, I'm picking the Cowboys to win just because the ball is oblong and it bounces weird sometimes. I just think that, look, this has been a very wonky season for the Houston Texans too. They came into this year as big time favorites in the AFC. I think there were a lot of people's kind of sneaky Super Bowl picks, for a lot of folks. And it's not like they've had a bad season. They're 6-4. It's certainly a playoff season in striking distance for them. But I do think it has been disappointing for them. And I, as someone who's rooted for a team that's had a disappointing season, this is the kind of game that disappointing teams lose. So I don't know why I would have any confidence in the Cowboys. I think it's more just dumb luck and bad luck that I'm hoping for here. So I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win a stupid game. Like lots of fumbles and penalties and all kinds of stuff. Let's say 21-20.
So this is
like a field goal to win it.
This is terrible analysis. I'm giving it to you anyways. I think a majority of Cowboy fans would like to see this Cowboys team lose and get embarrassed on Monday Night Football to make Jerry Jones feel bad, right? And to make him really reflect on what he's done to this team, which probably means that they're going to win a stupid game and the Jerry Jones is going to sell you over the next couple of weeks. Hey, we're not out of it. Make sure you tune in to Cooper Rush and Tommy Cutlets on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to predict the Texans to win, but I do get a vibe that this game is going to be weirdly close. And again, I could be completely wrong. It just feels like there's a lot of players in the Cowboys they're going to be playing for pride tonight. It's a primetime game at home. I just looked at it at FanDuel. The line is 7. I saw earlier today that 92% of bettors are taking the Texans to cover that spread, which is usually a sign that the public is wrong. Like when the public is that heavy on a team, usually the opposite happens. The hard part for me is how do the Cowboys get to like 23 points to win this game? That's where I'm having a hard time getting. But if you get, a big play on special teams, you get a turnover inside the 10-yard line. You have an early drive where you go down and get a field goal. Maybe this is a 16-13 game going into the fourth quarter. I'm going to pick Texans to win, but I do think it's going to be close.
I think there's like 18 paths, right, where like CJ Stroud has a bad early part of the game. He fumbles the ball, he intercepts it. Like Parsons comes knifing through the A gap and he gets a bad throw off. And I don't know, Hooker gets the ball and it's a pick 6 or something like that. I think even in those games, like, of those 18, they probably, the Texans probably come back and end up winning 15 of them, right? Yeah. Like CJ Stroud finds a way. But of those 18, there's probably 3 of those games where it's not enough. He can't come back, or the Cowboys are able to kind of hold it off, or things start to snowball for Houston. So I do think that there is a way the Cowboys win this game. I don't think it's the odds-on favorite, but no. I certainly could see this being one of those just dumb NFL games where the opposite of everything you think is going to happen happens, and it just turns out that way.
Last thing before we go. Nico Collins is going to play in this game, and Houston is just a much different offense when he's on the field. There's a chance that his presence just makes this offense take off for Houston, and because the Cowboys are decimated at corner, they just don't have the horses to cover those guys. So fully acknowledging that Nico could be the difference in this game, but you do get the sense that there's going to be some pride on the line for Dallas, and they're going to play hard in this game in prime time. We'll see what happens. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.